Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Bitter Pill. So, tonight I want to talk about a couple of things. First of all, I want to talk about a recent uh, kangaroo court trial in California where animal rights activist Wayne Hsiung was convicted of felony conspiracy to trespass, I think it is, for his efforts in organizing a an investigation of allegedly humane animal farms in California and rescuing some diseased animals that they found. And so I wanted to talk some about that trial and their investigation and just the general animal agribusiness practices that Direct Action Everywhere, or DXE as it's often called for short, has uncovered. So, so let's first of all talk about. Oh, and also I wanted to talk a little bit, if I have time, because I do have some work to do later tonight. So we'll see. But I did want to talk tonight, if I get a chance, about the um, protests for freedom for Palestinians, protests against Israeli genocide in Palestine that took place yesterday in Washington, D.C., and San Francisco, and uh, scores of cities around the world. So, first of all, though, let's talk about our main story, the trial and conviction of Wayne Hsiung, the co founder of the animal rights group Direct Action Everywhere. So, okay, so Wayne was convicted of felony conspiracy and a couple of misdemeanor trespassing charges, and was jailed right after the end of the trial. Just whisked away in handcuffs to jail, no bail or anything. He's being held in jail with no opportunity for bail. Um, I don't know where they think, why they would think he's a flight risk or a threat or whatever it is, but no opportunity for bail until the end of the month when his sentencing is scheduled. And I guess I heard that it's a felony conviction, but it's not like a major felony. So I think the maximum sentence will be about a year long, but we'll see. So, and I'm just reading to you from the press release that DXE put out after the trial. And I was going to be slick and highlight the most important parts, but they were trying to be succinct anyway, so I wound up highlighting almost the whole thing. So, anyway, the trial went on for about 8 weeks. Um, and the jury took a long time to make a decision. They kept being called back into the courtroom and asked if they had reached a verdict, and they said no, except on uh, one count. And so Wayne, who's an attorney who's often acted in his own defense in trials that he's had for his animal rescue and investigation efforts, um, he was found guilty of felony conspiracy and misdemeanor trespass charges for his involvement in nonviolent mass actions where animals were openly rescued from factory farms in Sonoma County. And the jury was not able to reach a unanimous verdict, so they had a hung jury, in other words, on the felony conspiracy charge that he was also hit with from an investigation and rescue at Reichart Duck Farms. So, right after the trial, they cuffed him and took him away into custody where he'll be held until his sentencing hearing on November 30th. So Wayne is a co-founder, along with half a dozen or five other people, of the International Animal Rights Network Direct Action Everywhere, which is leading a campaign to enshrine the legal right to rescue sick and injured animals from commercial operations. So in other words, there's legal statutes already in place in California as far as how animals are supposed to be treated in uh, farms raising animals for food. And if somebody investigates and finds that there's a violation of the law, or otherwise they find sick and injured animals, according to what DXC is advocating for, they want to enshrine in law the right to rescue those animals that wouldn't be worth anything to the company anyway, right? They'd probably die, if they were sick or injured enough before they could even be slaughtered and sent to market. And interesting thing about this, we think of California as a very liberal state, although it's a big state and it varies a lot from place to place. But whereas Wayne was convicted in Sonoma County, California, of these charges, except for the one with the hung jury, last year he was acquitted of felony burglary, and theft in a case in Utah where they rescued some sick pigs. And there have been other acquittals in trials where Direct Action Everywhere activists were charged with some sort of criminal charge, trespassing or burglary or what have you, when they have investigated the cruel practices on farms and rescued animals that were sick or dying. Hsiung plans to appeal the conviction in Sonoma based on several rulings by Judge Laura Pasaglia that he alleges constitute prejudicial and reversible error, including the exclusion of almost all photo and video evidence showing animal cruelty at the factory farms where the rescues occurred. So if you go to Direct Actions Everywhere's website, you can find tons and tons of video footage of their rescue efforts where they show the condition of the animals inside these farms, most of which are supposedly humane, right? They're supposed to, they market their dead animals as having been humanely raised before they were slaughtered. And in every single case, they find that, their claims are not backed up by the way the animals are actually treated. So in this case, which involved investigations of 3 farms in Sonoma County, over 100 people affiliated with DXC were arrested on felony charges for their part in nonviolent demonstrations, where activists provided emergency medical aid to sick and injured animals at Sunrise Farms, which supplies Whole Foods and Costco with eggs, Petaluma Poultry, a subsidiary of poultry giant Purdue, which at least at one point was also a supplier to Whole Foods, and Reinhardt Duck Farm. In total, 38 chickens and 32 ducks were removed from the facilities by the activists. This came after county and state authorities ignored repeated reports of criminal animal abuse at these facilities. So it's not just that, even in California, which has the strictest animal welfare laws in the country, as far as I know, that even they're not very strict, because animal welfare and animal rights are obviously not the same thing. And as I'll talk about in a little while, there's pretty wide latitude under these laws about how the animals can be treated. But these facilities supplying to major grocery chains like Whole Foods and Costco were repeatedly violating the law. So the open rescue at Sunrise Farms, the Whole Foods and Costco egg supplier, was prompted by investigations that occurred in 2016 through 2018, which found that despite Proposition 2, passed shortly before that, banning intensive confinement of animals on factory farms, Sunrise was confining tens of thousands of birds in towering 15-foot tall rows of tightly packed cages, inside of which many birds were sick, dying, and dead. So if you can imagine, birds all crammed into a cage, many of them sick, and the cages are stacked on top of each other so that birds are like shitting on each other and so forth. Investigators also found violations of California's animal cruelty statute, Penal Code 597, including injured birds who were unable to access food or water. So they're just sitting there, not able to walk, and so they can't get to food or water, so they starve to death or die of thirst. On the day of the Sunrise action in May 2018, Sergeant Dave Thompson promised Hsiung that they could walk through the farm together to provide aid and remove any sick or injured birds. However, no inspection ever occurred, and body camera footage showed that the officer's body cam showed the officers admitting to merely checking a box instead of taking the activist animal cruelty concerns seriously. So this was one of the things that the judge allowed the jury to see, was that, the officers lying about what they did when these allegations were brought to them. At Reinhardt Duck Farm, investigations by Mercy for Animals in 2014 and by DXE in 2019 revealed systematic violations of animal cruelty law, including diseased ducks stuck on their backs, unable to get up, and consequently unable to reach food or water. Zoe Rosenberg, a defense witness and DXE investigator, testified that she collected deceased ducks from the facility and sent them for necropsy tests that revealed a fatal disease was spreading in the facility. But she was prohibited by the judge from telling the jury the name of the disease or describing it. The defendant, that is Wayne, attempted to bring two key defenses in the case: a defense to trespass under Penal Code 597E, and in other words, they find out that there's violations of Penal Code 597E, and so based on those violations, which result in animals being sick or injured or dying, they have the right to trespass he or use in order to rescue those animals. And the second defense is the defense of necessity, based on the activist's right to aid animals who were being subjected to criminal animal cruelty under other laws. Judge Laura Pasaglia prohibited Hsiung from arguing either defense before the jury and only permitted him to discuss 597E in the context of a mistake of law defense, pursuant to which Hsiung argued that he had a good faith belief that his actions were legal. The defense called a total of 13 witnesses, including Hsiung, other participants at the Sunrise and Reinhardt actions, legal scholar and Professor Hadar Aviram, and expert veterinarian Dr. Kirsten Rosenberg, who is Zoe Rosenberg's mother. Every witness who participated in the actions testified about their good faith belief in the legal right to enter private property to aid animals, based on legal opinions they reviewed from Professor Aviram or former federal prosecutor Bonnie Clapper. Throughout the trial, Hsiung encountered numerous judicial obstacles, including a gag order barring him from speaking with the media about the case. So the ACLU took up this based on obvious violations of Hsiung's First Amendment rights, but the judge refused to respond to the ACL's ruling. Although prosecution witnesses repeatedly testified that the treatment of the animals at their facilities is humane, Judge Pasaglia prohibited the defense from showing the jury photo and video evidence of animal cruelty that disproved these testimonies, except on a few limited occasions for direct impeachment. So, in the interest of time, and because I know that YouTube will probably ding me for showing graphic footage, I'm not going to show you videos here, but you can go to Direct Action Everywhere's website and have a look for yourself. So there were a few occasions where it was allowed to show some stuff, but not many. Michael Weber, co-owner of Sunrise, testified that there were no sick and injured animals on the ranch in any of the buildings on May 29th, 2018. So even though the activists are taking sick and injured animals out of the facility to the vet, and the vet is treating them and, of course, verifying that they have these issues. The co-owner of Sunrise Farms, the egg factory farm, it's a supplier to Whole Foods, said there's no sick and injured animals there. So Wayne did get to present a video taken 11 days prior to the action, showing a hen with an eye tumor struggling to walk or reach food, which resulted from overcrowding-induced pecking at the facility. So they like to tell you that at these so-called humane farms, the animals have tons of room to run around, but in fact, they're so crowded that they peck each other out of just. They're just neurotic. They're really upset. Weber also described the chicken's environment as stress-free and humane, but during cross-examination, he admitted that birds regularly cannibalize each other due to stress and disease. By appealing the guilty verdict, Hsiung has the chance to establish case law in the appellate court. Such a precedent would not only vindicate his actions, but also provide a stronger legal foundation for the defense of animals in future cases. During the 5-year prosecution of Hsiung and the other activists, and even during the trial itself, DXE investigators continued to document animal cruelty at these very same two farms, Sunrise Farms and Reinhardt Doug Farm, and to rescue individuals in need of emergency medical care from both facilities. After the verdict was announced, DXE activists went straight from the courtroom to the Sonoma County District Attorney's office to once again report criminal animal cruelty at factory farms in the county. They delivered a letter with their findings, including photos taken at the two facilities in recent weeks. The letter also included 2021 hidden camera footage showing Sunrise employees killing birds by breaking their necks, despite company owner Michael Weber claiming during the trial that they don't use this kill method, known as cervical dislocation. DXC's new footage at Reinhardt shows that 4 years after the previous DXC rescue for which Wayne was charged, and 9 years after Mercy for Animals first exposed the company's cruelty, many ducks are still so sick that they're stuck on their backs, unable to stand up and access food and water. So they just slowly starve to death or die of thirst. Okay, let's see what else I got for you here. So DXC's work caught the attention of Mother Jones magazine, so they did a little video on it, an article on it a few years ago. So let me just briefly talk about that a little bit. And as some of you who watch this show probably know, Mother Jones was named after a radical labor organizer named Mary Mother Jones, and she was a true radical, a true revolutionary. And when it first came into existence, back in the day before there was such a thing as the internet, um, Mother Jones magazine was actually a very good independent did very good independent journalism, very left leaning, thorough, um, thoroughly investigative reporting type of publication. Um, but not so much anymore. But this report was actually pretty good, I thought. So, in any case, they say, and I think this was published in 2015. Okay, so DXA started doing their investigations in, I believe, early 2014. So 10 times over the course of a year and a half, under cover of night, a group of radical animal rights activists snuck into the facilities of a large operation called Petaluma Farms, a major West Coast supplier to Whole Foods in Organic Valley. The Petaluma egg complex produces both certified organic and non-organic cage-free eggs. The main difference between the two being that organic eggs must come, whatever, not too different. Footage taken from within the Petaluma facility shows lots of birds wallowing tightly together, often amidst what looks like significant buildup of their own waste. The narrators use words like stench, filth, and misery to describe the scene, and show several birds in obvious bad health. Birds with blisters, missing feathers, one clearly caked with shit, along with birds that appear to be in decent shape. The crew dramatically rescues one pathetically injured bird, handing her over the fence and whisking her to a vet in Berkeley. And, of course, the owners of the farm, just like the owners of Sunrise Farms, claimed that their animals were in great health typically, and this video in no way reflects our practices or the overall health of our flocks, of course. But, these facilities keep getting investigated year after year and found to continue the same horrific practices. Last year, Petaluma settled a lawsuit brought by the Animal Legal Defense Fund over the depiction of the lives of its hens on its packaging. As part of the agreement, in which Petaluma did not admit to wrongdoing, the company agreed to modify its egg cartons by removing the illustration of hens on a green field and removing the language that plaintiff alleged could lead consumers to mistakenly believe the eggs come from hens with significant outdoor access. Previously, the inside of the cartons claimed that these hens are raised in wide open spaces in Sonoma Valley where they are free to roam, scratch, and play, which, of course, is utter bullshit. They're kept inside, except briefly allowed outside once in a while. Kind of like prisoners, really. So anyway, let me go to something else here. Okay, well, back in 2000, the period from like 2014 to 2017 or so, I was an activist with Direct Action Everywhere, and I didn't do any animal rescue with them, but I did do some writing and some protests at Whole Foods and stuff like that. So this is an article I wrote that is kind of an expansion on a letter that we co-wrote to Whole Foods in 2016 about their deceptive marketing practices, which were designed to con customers into believing that the animals raised on farms that were Whole Food suppliers, like Petaluma, like Sunrise, and like at I'm not sure if the duck uh, farm also supplied Whole Foods. But in any case, um, let me just read you briefly some of the things I said about Whole Foods and about their practices and those in general of the so-called humane meat um, movement or marketing scam, uh, as you might say. So Whole Foods was founded in 1980 as a small natural foods grocery store in Austin, Texas, and then it rapidly grew over the years to, by the time that I wrote this in early 2016, the fourth largest U.S.-owned grocery chain. During those 36 years, one thing has never changed. Like most of its competitors, Whole Foods keeps its shelves and freezers amply stocked with the flesh and bodily secretions of animals who have been brutally exploited. Um, and so, over the same time period, public concern for the plight of animals was rapidly growing. So, when I attended college in the early 1980s, hardly anybody had heard of veganism, and so I met a vegan in college, first vegan I'd ever met, and the only one for quite a while. But nowadays, most of the restaurants at airports offer vegan options. There are even vegan restaurant chains, um, and opinion polls suggest that not only um, not only are people becoming somewhat concerned about health effects of eating lots of steak or whatever, there is growing concern for animals' well-being. So one poll found that 74% of Americans believe that humans have an obligation never to harm animals, which is kind of a curious finding considering that something like 95% of people eat animals and probably 98 or 99% eat animal products like eggs and milk and cheese. 32% believe that animals deserve the exact same rights as people to be free from harm and exploitation. So this is kind of paradoxical because they also are eating meat, and they tend to agree with statements to the effect that exploiting animals for food is okay as long as it's done sufficiently, quote unquote, humanely. Paul suggests that most people, I should say, continue to believe that if an animal product is labeled humanely raised, then those animals are in fact treated humanely. Nearly 70% say they prioritize animal welfare in deciding what foods to purchase. And so Whole Foods jumped on that bandwagon more than any other company in the food business. They attempted to market themselves as compassionate toward animals. Spent tens of millions of dollars pushing that claim. So even today, inside every Whole Foods, you go in there and you see signs like the one below, know what kind of life your dinner lived. And here's a woman holding a chicken, which I guess she's later going to have killed for her and eat it. So they try to tell you, they care about the animals that they sell the flesh of and milk and eggs from and cheese and so forth, and make sure they're treated humanely. Whole Foods says its animals are responsibly raised on farms where they largely roam free and have the opportunity to engage in natural behaviors, such as pecking each other to death because they're crammed together in tiny cages, right? They stated that we are committed to and focus on animal welfare for all species of animals raised for our meat department. And at one point, I guess, I don't know if it's still true, at a store in Maine, which, as you might expect, sold a lot of lobsters, they offered customers the option of, quote unquote, humanely electrocuting lobsters there at the store. They would do that for you rather than, you taking the lobster home and boiling it alive. So just imagine you get a front row seat to a lobster being put in an electric chair for lobsters or something, and then you take it home and eat it. So Whole Foods makes a lot of money off of claiming that they treat animals humanely. So, if you buy your Thanksgiving turkey from Whole Foods, for instance, you can count on paying uh, something like 5 times the average price for turkey. But even if you got what you paid for, and everything Whole Foods said about the treatment of animals on its highest rated farms, like Petaluma or um, Sunrise, the one that Wayne was convicted for rescuing animals from. The humane claim rings hollow when we realize that we'd never allow anyone to treat our dog or cat that way, and kill them, at a tiny fraction of their natural lifespan. Um, and if you look at what the actual humane, so to speak, standards are, including Whole Foods standards, which are supposed to be stricter than the usual humane standards. Their standards allow for pigs and calves to be castrated without anesthesia, for sows to be nose ringed, so that they can't nurse. For turkeys to be euthanized by quote unquote by having their necks broken barehanded. For male chicks to be killed at birth because, of course, males can't lay eggs, so they're given the breed of chicken they are. They're not economically viable. They can't make a lot of money off of raising them, so they just kill them in those cases at birth. And for calves to be separated from their mothers so that humans can have their milk. We wouldn't have milk or eggs or milk or cheese or yogurt or what have you from dairy cows if the calves were nursing and taking their milk for the typical period of time that calves nurse, which is a lot longer than they're allowed to. And for a long time, many animal welfare organizations, such as PETA and so forth, kind of went along with promoting the myth that animals were being treated humanely. Peter Singer in 2005, animal welfare activist Peter Singer wrote an open letter to Whole Foods CEO John Mackey, co-signed by many animal advocacy organizations at the time, expressing appreciation and support for Whole Foods' pioneering initiative in creating its farm animal compassion standards. But when Whole Foods suppliers were investigated, first by other animal welfare organizations like PETA and I'm blanking on the other names, and later by DXE. They found, for instance, that young rabbits were deprived of water in filthy cages before they were killed for meat. As many as 30 a day were found dead before they could even be sent to slaughter. And last year, in 2015, I should say, investigators from PETA found pigs crammed into crowded sheds on concrete floors at a farm that supplied Whole Foods. And then there was a DXE investigation of one of Whole Foods' super highly rated humane turkey suppliers, Dicetail Ranch, where, on the one hand, Whole Foods was claiming that these turkeys were living free on open pastures. Instead, they were, surprise, surprise, crammed into dark, disease-filled sheds, crowded conditions. Countless birds suffered and died, often afflicted with swollen crops. This part right here, the size of grapefruits, often unable to walk, and the air was just filled with ammonia from their urine due to the extreme crowding. So I and some other folks wound up writing a new open letter to Whole Foods CEO John Mackey about these conditions that are contrary to Whole Foods' claim that they're humanely raised. And so at the time, Wayne said about Dicetail Farms, this farm was the best of the best, literally in the top 0.1%. So if this farm is cruel, what does that say about the rest of the industry? And, you can say the exact same thing about, um, you know, Sunrise Farms and Petaluma Poultry, they have a reputation of being, highly humane, right? But in fact, uh, their conditions are absolutely horrible, and uh, 38 chickens were sick and injured and dying, and were rescued by DXC from these two facilities. So, don't believe the hype about um, humane meat and dairy and eggs and so forth. Basically, you're getting ripped off if you think you're paying for animals to be treated humanely before they're killed, because that just isn't true. There's these regulations that they're supposed to follow that still aren't very good, um, and even if they were, I mean, exploiting animals by holding them captive and then killing them at a really young age for food is, in my opinion, as a animal rights person, as a vegan, still not acceptable. But even beyond that, there's all these laws in states like California regulating the animals' welfare that are not enforced at all. And then when investigators like Wayne and his colleagues at DXC look, all these laws are being violated. All these animals that you say are healthy are sick and injured and often dying. And diseases are widespread in these facilities. So, one of the main concerns of um, infectious disease specialists is that one day, because of the extensive use of antibiotics in factory farms to tamp down the spread of diseases that would otherwise run rampant, we're eventually going to reach a point where it's really hard to find antibiotics that work, and then we'll be in really big trouble from certain infectious diseases. But anyway, as I was saying, so all these laws go unenforced, and DXE or PETA or whoever comes along and shows, look, these laws are being violated, these animals are sick and so forth. The cops won't do anything. Nobody enforces the law. And instead of enforcing laws that are clearly being violated, they charge animal rights activists who are rescuing sick and dying animals with these ridiculous, burglary charges, where, in the previous trial in Utah that Wayne faced, they were charging him and another activist with burglary, stealing animals from this farm. And in fact, and this was one of the reasons why Wayne and I forget the other defendant's name were acquitted, is that they showed, look, these animals are worthless because they're too sick to go to market. And the same obviously is true here, but it doesn't sound like the jury heard that. So they're throwing the book at people who are doing nothing more than trying to save animals who are suffering, and documenting the conditions in these farms that lead to their suffering. And it's not the companies, it's not these giant animal agribusinesses, which Whole Foods is now owned by Amazon, so it's even more gigantic than before. They don't get in trouble. It's the activists who show how they're causing enormous suffering and harm to animals, and cruelly exploiting them. They're the ones who get in trouble, and it's just not right. And so let's hope that Wayne wins his appeal. Anona says, organic food industry is full of scams. Well, yeah, but the whole thing is a scam. The whole thing is a scam, right? Because the regulations that they have still, as I was saying earlier, allow animal farmers to treat animals in ways that cause all kinds of suffering, like debeat them without anesthesia and crazy stuff like that. So yeah, there's really, I mean, there's really no way to, you know, humanely kill an animal who doesn't want to die, or humanely confine an animal that would otherwise be able to roam around freely their whole natural life. And in fact, they're not treated humanely even when uh, scam artists like Whole Foods and their suppliers market animals as being humanely treated. It's just not really true. Okay, so let's see. I just wanted to say a few words about the enormous uh, demonstrations that took place around the world um, over the weekend, mainly on Saturday. Uh, you know, dozens of, I guess, over 100 cities, I guess it was, around the world protested um, the genocide, and it really is literally genocide at this point, where because Israel has cut off virtually completely. They tried to cut it off completely, but I guess a little bit of aid is sneaking in. Supplies of food and water, which Israel already bombed their water treatment facilities, so Gaza doesn't have any fresh water of their own. Medicine, fuel, which, for instance, they need to run generators at hospitals, and electricity. All that's cut off, and then there's this massive carpet bombing campaign that's so far killed about 10,000 civilians. All allegedly in response to um, a Hamas-led incursion into Israel a month ago, October 7th, where there were, I guess the figure the Israeli government gave was 1,400 people, maybe 400 of them military people, and about 1,000 civilians were killed. And so they retaliated for this through basically collectively punishing the 2.3 million people living in Gaza who didn't have anything to do with the military operation in Israel. And also, as I mentioned on the show a couple of times before, there's lots of evidence, eyewitness testimony from Israelis themselves, indicating that a lot of the people who were killed in crossfire between Hamas et al. And the IDF, the Israeli Defense, or as we prefer to call them, occupation forces, as well as deliberate shelling and airstrikes and so forth from the Israeli military to try and take back the military base that Hamas took over, as well as settlements that they took over. And so a lot of the people were killed because they were just indiscriminately shelling or bombing and so forth to try and regain control of these places. So anyway, let me show you real quick. So this is a image of the, oh shoot, that didn't work. The organizers estimate, and it's really hard to estimate these things. The organizers estimate 300,000 people attended the Washington March for Free Palestine and against Israel's bombing campaign in Gaza and the stepped up atrocities in the West Bank, where Hamas doesn't even exist. So here's a sped up time lapse photo of people marching through the streets of DC. CNN allegedly said, I haven't looked, but supposedly they said there were 40,000 people at the march. Al Jazeera said 100,000, and the organizers said 300,000. Now you tell me, looks probably, if we run all through this, that like a lot more than 40,000 people at any rate were there. Supposedly well, I saw pictures and it looked like it, filled the whole width of the National Mall and was backed up all the way from um, Freedom Plaza to the Capitol. So they pretty much filled up the space. Okay, now it's on repeat. Let's see. I just wanted to show you, um, a little bit of footage from the march to give you an idea of what was said. Um, Now, I've been, among many activist causes I've been involved in since I started doing this as a young adult in the early 80s. I've gone to many a pro-Palestine demonstration advocating for liberating Palestine from uh, apartheid-like conditions and uh, ethnic cleansing and military occupation and so forth that's been going on for the entire 75 years of Israel's existence. And, I can tell you that what you'll see here in a minute is pretty representative of what, I've seen at demonstrations for many years. Okay, let's go back to the beginning here. Okay, so I mean, you can watch the entire footage of the march for yourself. Unfortunately, kind of disappointingly, Breakthrough News's coverage, which Breakthrough News is certainly one of my all-time favorite news outlets. I love Brian Becker and Rania Khalek and Eugene um, Eugene Puryear. Um, but the sound quality was not very good on this. It kept fading out. So I guess there's ABC News footage where their video quality sucks, but the sound is good. So maybe watch that if you want to watch uh, full speeches. But here, let me just show you some chants at the beginning of the march, and then we'll watch one speech that I thought was particularly good.
Today, free, free, let's stop! Free, free, let's stop! Free, free, let's stop! Free, free, let's stop! Lift the Hsiung now! 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 From the river to the sea! From the river to the sea! Palestine will be free!
Okay, so supporters of Israel love to single out that chant, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," and claim that it's somehow advocating that Palestinians are going to push Jews into the sea or some shit like that, or going to kill them all and take over Palestine. But like people have been saying that particular chant for decades and decades. I've heard it all the time and said it all the time when I've gone to pro-Palestine protests against Israeli occupation and apartheid, and now obvious genocide. 10,000 people killed in a month, or slightly less than a month. And it just means exactly what it says. From the river to the sea, the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. Palestine will be free. Palestinians will achieve liberation, just like people in South Africa and Algeria and many, many other places freed themselves from colonial occupation. Palestinians are just trying to do the same thing. And even this Jewish news outlet, let's see, what is it? What does "from the river to the sea" really mean? Jewish Currents talks about how the slogan is just a slogan resisting the fact that Israel is occupying and Palestinian land, pushing people off the land. So the majority of Palestinians that are still somewhere in Palestine, either Gaza or the West Bank, um, you know, have been pushed off of, or at least their ancestors have been pushed off their land. That's the case for 70% of Gaza residents. Either they themselves or their ancestors were kicked off their land, had their houses stolen, and everything else they owned stolen by Israeli, Jewish settlers. And well, anyway, I'm not going to read this to you, but I'll put a link to it in the video description. Um, and they're just saying something that has been said for a long, long time. Um, that's basically just advocating. Look, we want there to be a free state in Palestine where everybody has equal rights, where Palestinians aren't either second-class citizens as they are within Israel itself, if they have citizenship, or they're not citizens of any country at all, and just they have no rights. And so that's what people have been chanting for years and years. Anyway, back to what else they're chanting here. When the siege on Gaza now, you want to ceasefire now? It doesn't sound like you're wanting to kill anybody, does it? Yeah? Okay, so that was at the beginning of the rally, and then they had about, uh, 2.5 hours of speeches. I went for a run today, and the speeches were still going on when I got back, even though I went for a pretty long run. But anyway, I just wanted to show you one speech that I thought was really good and kind of representative of the um, you know outlook of the speakers and the protesters. Sorry about the video quality. I don't know what you're saying. I'm sorry, guys.
As the saying goes, they tried to bury us. They didn't know we were seeds. Well, know now, those seeds that you buried have long sprouted, nurtured by a commitment to justice and dignity. Our roots extend deep into our communities, our workplaces, our campuses. We will weather all your attempts to cut us down. And just as the sun rises, we too will continue to rise until Palestine is free.
Okay, yeah, I thought that was an excellent speech. Let's see. What was I gonna do here? I was gonna show comments. So Anonymous says USA-style democracy is fake. Protests don't do anything. Not even the UN can do anything. Um, Mal was correct. He said political power comes from the barrel of, from the barrel of a gun. He was talking about the reality of life. Well, I mean, I think that's true to a certain extent. Just simply protesting by itself isn't enough to change things. But protests do have some important effects when they're accompanied by ample media coverage and pressure of various sorts on the political system. So sit-ins at Congress people's offices, like there've been, and constant phone calls and letters, and um, you know. Blockading ports that are shipping weapons to Israel, various things like that, and you can start to see cracks in the facade, um, starting to happen. As a result, both of just the widespread media coverage of you know a lot of the stuff, the horrible stuff that's happening in Gaza. It's also happening on a smaller scale in the West Bank. More than 100, I think it's like 150 people have just within the last month been killed in Gaza, where Hamas doesn't exist. And both settlers and the IDF and police are just brutalizing people for no reason, and stealing their stuff, like stealing their olives, for instance, and other stuff from them, beating the shit out of them. The cops are arresting people, or the IDF is arresting people without any charges, sweeping them off the streets, or for just petty stuff, putting them in jail. So when Israel supporters talk about, oh, Hamas must free the hostages. It's like, well, look, Israel has many, many times the number of Palestinians, held captive in Israeli prisons. I think the figure that I last heard was about 10,000, which is, almost 20 times the number of people being held captive by Hamas in Gaza. And in fact, that was the reason why Gaza took hostages and prisoners of war, and that was one of their main objectives, mainly to take military prisoners, but they also captured civilian prisoners, was to use them as a bargaining chip in order to get Palestinians who basically had done nothing wrong, or if they had done something wrong, it was resisting an unjust military occupation that under international law, of course, they have the right to resist. So trying to get Israel to release the thousands of Palestinians being held prisoner by Israel. But we are starting to see some shifts. So last week, for instance, or a few days ago, a senator from Illinois, Dick Durbin, announced that he was supporting the ceasefire, and 5 other members of Congress, mostly members of the squad, like Rashida Tlaib and AOC, have come out in support of a ceasefire. Whereas there was a solid wall of just unconditional support for Israel, or very mealy-mouthed criticism by the so-called left wing of the Democratic Party back a couple of weeks ago. And now we're starting to see Joy-Ann Reid on, I think she's on MSNBC News, was very, very critical of Israel's slaughter in Gaza on the news the other night. And there's some other cases where people have started to what was I? Oh, let's do this one. Okay, I do it like a ticker, don't I? Anyway, well, I want to sign off soon, but I just wanted to throw up. Please like, subscribe, and share this video. And also check out my blog on Substack. Free or paid subscriptions available to that. But anyway, as I was saying, there's signs that both the reality of what's happening in Palestine, where just outrageous, completely carrying out collective punishment against the civilian population of Gaza for the military action of October 7th. I mean, there's a pretense about going after military targets, but it's obvious that Hamas is mostly safe underground in their tunnels, unless they're taking on the Israeli military, blowing up tanks and so forth, as they've released videos of doing. Whereas civilians are just out in the open, and Israel is bombing the most densely populated areas, all over Gaza City, the largest population area in the Gaza Strip, targeting hospitals and schools and churches and mosques and so on and so forth, refugee camps, often places where people have taken refuge because Israel bombed their homes. So thousands of people are, gathered in a hospital or around on the grounds of a hospital, for instance, because they've had to leave their homes because Israel's destroyed them. And then Israel targets where those thousands of people are. So, and plus, the cutting off of the food and water, there's no question they're deliberately trying to kill people who haven't taken up arms against them at all. Not that people under military occupation don't have a right to do that, but 4,000 of the people that they've killed are children. 3 or 4,000 of them are women. Lots of men who, are just civilians have been targeted. So that, along with, the just unprecedented level of protests of various sorts, not just marches in the streets, but direct actions, such as, for instance, there have been a number of actions. I forget the name of the group, both in the UK and the US, that shut down Elbit Systems factories, the factories of Israel's leading weapons manufacturer. Several days of production lost. There's boycotts being organized. Don't buy Sabra hummus, for example. Make your own. There's a list at BDS, Boycott, Divest, and Sanctions websites. And if this stuff didn't work, if people couldn't do anything, or if what they were doing wasn't having an effect, you wouldn't be seeing all these efforts to censor people. Where Students for Justice in Palestine, for instance, has had their campus groups shut down at one after another university. There have been attempts to pass laws saying that you couldn't fly a Palestinian flag in the UK. There have been efforts to engage in mass arrests of people in Germany. Ironically, Germany rounded up and arrested Jews who were protesting against the occupation. Think about that. Same thing in France. Lots of folks I kind of sort of know have had their YouTube shows demonetized. A couple of good independent journalists who cover Palestine have had their channels removed from YouTube altogether. Had their PayPal stripped from them. They couldn't make money off of that anymore. So there are efforts to try and prevent people from exercising their free speech rights. In the U.S., their First Amendment rights to speak and write and assemble publicly and so forth. There have been assaults on that. People have been fired from their jobs for speaking out. None of that would be happening if the powers that be believe that, they can't do anything to us. We can, and we will. What else can I say? But free Palestine. Keep fighting to end this madness that not only has been going on for the past month, but on a bit lower scale has been going on for 75 years. Palestinians deserve justice. They deserve freedom, and they and allies like you and me, if you're not Palestinian, like I'm not, we need to keep fighting, and someday, who knows when, but someday we're gonna win. All right, I will see you next time.